Hey everybody, Ryan here at etrailer. Today on our 2018 Ford Explorer, we're going to be taking a look at and showing you how to install the Roadmaster 12-volt outlet kit. So there's going to be a total of 5 main components needed to flat tow your Explorer down the road. The first one's going to be your base plate. And that base plate is going to provide us with a solid and reliable connection point. That way we can hook up our tow bar to it. The tow bar is going to be that second component. This is actually going to be the physical link that connects the front of your Explorer to the back of your motorhome. The third component that you're going to need is safety cables. Now the safety cables are there in the event of an unlikely disconnect. These are going to keep your Explorer connected to your motorhome. The fourth main component that you're going to need is tow bar wiring. So the wiring is going to transfer the lighting functions from the back of your motorhome to the back of your Explorer, keeping you not only safe, but legal as well. And last but not least, you're going to need a braking system. Braking system, what it's going to do is apply the brakes in your Explorer whenever you hit the brakes in your motorhome. That's going to help bring you to a safe and predictable stop. Now there is a sixth component that isn't absolutely necessary, but does make life a lot easier whenever you're flat towing. Since the Explorer does require you to disconnect the battery whenever you flat tow, that can be a real hassle, and you can avoid that by picking up an automatic battery disconnect switch. That's going to allow you to disconnect and reconnect your battery simply by just pushing a button. So this is what your 12-volt outlet is going to look like once it's installed. It's out of the way, and you can hardly even notice it's there. Now, the main reason you're going to want to use this is for those of you that have a portable style braking system. Those require an outlet to be plugged into, that way they can operate correctly. Especially on the Explorer, since this does require you to disconnect the battery whenever you're flat towing it, you won't be able to use that traditional cigarette outlet that's usually located here in the front somewhere. That factory one just won't work. Since the battery's disconnected, it's not going to have any power. However, with this outlet kit, you can wire it directly to the battery. That way it'll always have power. So not only can you plug your braking system into it, you can also plug in other components as well, say your phone charger or anything like that. That will also power those up. So just to kind of give you an example on how this works, here we set in our portable braking system. We'll plug it into our outlet. And if we hit power, you can see that the unit turns on and it'll be able to function like it should. Now there is one thing I would have liked to have seen, and that's if the plug came included with a little rubber cap or something, so whenever you're not using it, that outlet could be covered, especially since we have it hot all the time. I just think it would be a nice touch. But other than that, there's really not a whole lot to it. As far as the installation goes, it's pretty easy. There's only a couple of wires you need to hook up. I will say I did have to use a few extra pieces to get the job done. I did have to extend one wire a couple of feet, so you will need to pick some wiring up. And I did use a couple of different ring terminals. So really not a huge deal, just more appropriate for our Explorer specifically. But speaking of the installation, let's go ahead and hook it up together now. To begin our install, we're going to be working here inside of the car on the driver's side underneath the dash. Now the first thing that we're going to need to do is take our wiring and route it through the firewall. That way we can get it up into the engine compartment. So you're going to take the other end of your wire and push it through the firewall underneath the car. I will say there wasn't a factory grommet that we could utilize. So what I had to do is drill a small opening into the firewall. So if you kind of peel back the carpet, you can see that bare metal. So I drilled the hole and then just used a rubber grommet to put in that hole to keep the wires protected from rubbing up against that bare metal. But this is right where I did it, and once I put that grommet in there, I simply just pushed the end of our wires through that opening. So here underneath our Explorer, this is where our wire came out through the firewall. So once you have it here, you can start to push it up into the engine compartment. So here in the engine compartment, you can see this is where our wires came up. Now since the Explorer, the battery does require to be disconnected whenever you're flat towing it. So in our case, we want to hook up our outlet directly to the battery. That way it'll always have power for our braking system. So what we're going to need to do is just modify this a little bit. We're going to have to change the ends on it. So we'll start with this one. This is the one that has the fuse built in, and we're going to need to put on a ring terminal on the end there. So we're going to cut this connector off, strip back the insulation, and we can grab a ring terminal. Now these ring terminals don't come included, so you will have to pick them up separately. The way that works is it just slides over that bare end of the wire, and we crimp it down. Now for the negative side, this one could potentially work, go over the negative stud on the battery. However, I think we might run short on wire and may give us some issues on where we can actually mount our plug. So you want some choices as far as that goes. So I'm actually going to extend this a little bit. I'll cut that off. Strip it back. Going to grab a heat shrink butt connector. Pick that up here at etrailer as well. Crimp it on. And then we can grab a little extra wire. So this wire is not included. This is some I just had laying around. I'll strip that end back. Get into the butt connector. Crimp it down. And I think I'm going to extend it maybe about a foot or so. I'm going to trim that up. And then on this end, we're going to attach another ring terminal. Crimp it down. Then I can come back, since I used a heat shrink butt connector, I will simply just take my heat source and seal up those ends. So we'll go ahead and start with the negative side. We'll remove this nut here using a 10mm. Just pull that off and slide our ring terminal on and tighten that nut back down. If you go to the positive side, you can remove this nut here, and since this has a fuse in it, what I'm actually going to do is take that out. Kind of let that part set for now. Don't lose that fuse. And we're just going to connect this end. That way, once we have everything ready to go, we can come back and reinstall that fuse. I'll pull this nut off here with a 10mm. Slide on our ring terminal. And just tighten it back down. So now back inside our Explorer, underneath the dash, I mounted up the bracket, and I just used a couple of self-tapping screws to secure it. Now I will say with these brackets, the plug does fit very tight inside of there, so what I actually did was just used a file and just kind of opened it up a little bit to make it easier. But I just took our plug, kind of just ran it behind that panel there, and now we can push this into the bracket to keep it secure. Now back under the hood, since we have everything hooked up, we can go ahead and reinstall our fuse. Then we can find something to plug into our outlet, that way we can test it and make sure it's working properly. So to test our socket out, I just grabbed this little charger, and whenever it is plugged in, we should have some lights on the screen illuminate. So you can see it lights up, you know we're getting power, and it's working the way it should. And that'll finish up our look at and our installation of the Roadmaster 12 volt outlet kit on our 2018 Ford Explorer.